Imagine this. There's a catastrophic failure at a work site. I mean, total chaos. Dust, sirens, confusion. And in the aftermath, families are just shattered. A whole community is asking, how? How could this possibly have happened? Then the investigation starts. And what it uncovers is this long, ugly history of ignored warnings, of safety shortcuts, a management culture that put profits way, way ahead of people. It wasn't just one person's mistake. It was a sickness in the whole system. So, who's to blame when a system itself is at fault? Can you actually put a company on trial? Can an entity with no body, no soul, be found guilty of killing someone? That's the huge, complicated question we're diving into today.
This quote it nails it, doesn't it? It gets right to the heart of the problem. Because it wasn't one faulty bolt or one person falling asleep on the job. No. It was a chain reaction of ignored emails, of budget cuts to safety gear, a culture that just screamed, get it done no matter what. And so finding justice isn't about finding one single scapegoat in that chain. It's about holding the entire organization that built that chain accountable for its links.
So let's just ask it point blank. Can a corporation, this abstract legal thing, be guilty of a crime as deeply human as manslaughter? For a really long time, the answer, in practice, was basically no. But the law and our whole understanding of what it means for a company to be responsible has gone through a massive, seismic shift. We're going to trace that whole journey and see what it means for every single one of us in the workplace today.
Here's the roadmap for today. We're going to break this down into 5 key parts. First, we'll get our heads around the basic idea of a company even being on trial. Then, we're going to look at this huge legal problem, this loophole really, called the directing mind problem that protected big companies for decades. After that, we'll get to the game-changing law that finally smashed through that barrier. Then, we'll pull it right into the 21st century and ask what all this means for remote work. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with what this duty of care really means for you and me. Let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, we have to start with this fundamental idea that an organization, not just the people inside it, can be held criminally responsible when someone dies. This is absolutely crucial because it means a company can't just throw up its hands and hide behind its complicated flowcharts when things go horribly, horribly wrong. And this is the legal term we're talking about, corporate manslaughter. Let's just break that down. A gross breach is not a little mistake. We're talking about a massive, reckless failure. Think about a construction company that knows a crane has a frayed cable but uses it anyway to save a few bucks. And that duty of care, that's the fundamental legal obligation that company has to keep its people safe. When that duty is broken so badly that someone dies, that's when you enter the territory of corporate manslaughter.
All right, now for a part of the story that is, well, it's kind of baffling. The directing mind problem. For decades, even though the idea of corporate liability existed, prosecutors kept failing over and over to convict big companies after major disasters. So let's unpack this insane legal loophole.
The roadblock was this thing called the identification principle. And here's how it worked. To find a company guilty, you first had to find one single person guilty. And not just anybody. That person had to be so senior, so powerful, that their mind was the company's mind. They had to be the directing mind and will, literally the brain of the whole operation.
And this slide just lays it all out. For a small company, it's pretty simple, right? The owner is usually the directing mind. If they know about a safety risk and ignore it, boom, you've got a clear line of responsibility. But in a giant multinational corporation, forget about it. Decisions are made in committees. Information gets stuck in different departments. A deadly failure might be the result of a dozen different mid-level managers all making small, bad decisions, but no single person on the board knows the whole story. The directing mind was basically everywhere and nowhere all at once.
So you can just imagine being a prosecutor back then. You're trapped in this impossible loop. You've got the tragic accident, check. You might even find the specific team on the ground whose actions led to it, check. But then you hit step 3, prove that one single top-level director was pulling all the strings. And that's where the case would just collapse every single time. The result? A few tiny companies got convicted, but the corporate giants, even after massive disasters, remained completely untouchable. The system was totally broken.
Okay, pop quiz time. Let's make sure we've got this locked in. Under that old frustrating identification principle, what was the main reason it was so incredibly hard to convict big companies? A, B, C, or D? Take a second and think about it.
And the answer is B. It was the near impossibility of pinning the blame on one single person at the tippy top. In these giant, complex organizations, responsibility is spread out, often by design. And this old legal principle just couldn't handle that reality. It was effectively a get-out-of-jail-free card for big corporations.
So, this brings us to the turning point. After years of public anger, especially after several high-profile disasters where no corporation was ever held responsible, the UK Parliament finally said enough is enough. They created a brand new law designed specifically to fix this directing mind mess once and for all.
The year was 2007. This was the moment. The law was the Corporate Manslaughter and Corporate Homicide Act, and this one piece of legislation completely rewrote the rulebook on corporate accountability in the UK, and its shockwaves have been felt all over the world. This slide shows you the massive shift. The old law was all about finding a guilty person. The new law is about finding a guilty system. The entire focus of an investigation changed overnight. Instead of this hopeless hunt for one person at the top, investigators now look at the management practices, the safety culture, the systemic rot across the company's entire leadership. So the act got rid of that narrow directing mind idea and replaced it with the much, much broader concept of senior management. And this isn't just the CEO and the board anymore. We're talking about anyone who plays a significant role in making big decisions or managing how the company actually runs. Now, the actions and the knowledge of this whole group of people can be put together to prove the company itself is guilty. All right, let's do another quick check-in. What was the single biggest, most important change that came with that 2007 act? Was it A, B, C, or D? And the answer, of course, is B. It shifted the entire legal game away from blaming one person and towards looking at the whole organization's culture, its policies, its systems. This was the breakthrough, the key that finally unlocked real accountability for the biggest companies. Okay, let's get a little more specific now. When a jury is in that room trying to decide if a company is guilty of corporate manslaughter, what's one of the key things the Act specifically says they have to look at? The correct answer is B, and this is so smart. The Act directly connects corporate manslaughter to all the existing health and safety laws. So if a company was ignoring safety regulations, and that failure contributed to a death, well, that becomes powerful evidence for the prosecution. It builds a bridge directly from the boardroom's decisions to the safety of the person on the ground. So we've seen how the law had to evolve to catch up with the 20th century corporation. But now, the very definition of a workplace is being completely rewritten. So how do these hard-won legal principles apply to this new frontier of remote work? That's what we're looking at next. Now, before we dive headfirst into remote work, it's interesting to see how the US handles this. While the UK created this direct law for systemic failure, the US often uses a principle called vicarious liability. Basically, it means a company is responsible for what its employees do, as long as they were doing it for the company's benefit. It's just a different way of getting to the same place, and it shows this is a global conversation. And this brings us to the huge question of our time. The whole legal idea of a workplace was built around physical buildings, places the employer owned and controlled. But what happens when that's just not true anymore? What's a company's responsibility for your safety when your office is your kitchen table, or a spare bedroom, or even a coffee shop? The massive shift to remote work has been amazing in so many ways, but legally, it's a total minefield. All of a sudden, employers are having to ask, are we on the hook if an employee's home office setup gives them a repetitive strain injury? And what about the mental health crisis of isolation and burnout? These are the brand new challenges of the remote work age. And these are the specific problems. It goes way beyond tripping over a wire in your living room. Yeah, the ergonomic risks are real. A company could absolutely be liable for the chronic back pain you get from a terrible home setup if they did nothing to help. But the even bigger challenge is what they call psychosocial stressors. Isolation, burnout. These aren't just feelings. They are now recognized as workplace hazards. Courts are looking at whether a company's policies, like expecting emails to be answered at 10 p.m., are creating a toxic digital environment. That pressure to be always on can have devastating health consequences, and an employer's duty of care covers these invisible but very, very real risks.
So let's get this crystal clear. An employer's duty of care, where does it stop? Does it end at the office door, or does it follow you home? What do you think?
The answer, and this is so important to get, is C. The duty of care is not tied to a building. It's tied to the employee. That legal obligation to protect you from foreseeable harm follows you wherever you are working. And in today's world, foreseeable harm now includes burnout from being online 24/7 and physical injuries from a bad home office chair.
Okay, so that brings us to our final section, our duty of care. We've talked about the history, the law, the crazy new challenges. So now let's boil all this down into some practical, real-world takeaways for every single one of us. So if you're an employer, what should you be doing right now? Well, it all starts with being proactive. You have to assess the risks of home working, and that means more than just a simple checklist. You need to provide real training, not just on software, but on how to set up your desk properly and how to spot the signs of burnout in yourself and your colleagues. And most of all, you have to keep talking, keep communicating. This isn't just about avoiding a lawsuit. It's about building a healthier and more resilient team. And for our last question, let's get really practical. OSHA, the big safety regulator in the US, has some very specific rules about safety training. What is one of the things that they say employers must do? And the answer is A. This is such a perfect example of the whole principle in action. It's not enough to just have training. The training has to actually work. And for it to work, people have to be able to understand it. There can't be a language barrier when it comes to safety. It just shows you the level of detail and care that's required. So let's wrap this up. Here are the big takeaways. For years, that identification principle made it almost impossible to hold big companies accountable. The UK's 2007 Act completely changed the game by focusing on systemic failures. Remember that duty of care follows the employee wherever they work. And today, remote work is creating a whole new world of safety challenges, from back pain to burnout. The bottom line, proactive risk assessment and clear communication aren't just nice-to-haves anymore, they are absolutely essential. And that leaves us with one last massive question to think about. The way we work is never going to stand still. We've seen the law struggle and finally catch up to the reality of the 20th century corporation. But now, as we dive deeper into an age of gig work, AI managers, and globally scattered teams, the next evolution is already here. And the question for all of us is, how do we make sure our laws and our ethics keep up to protect human life and well-being, no matter what the future of work looks like?